I think we might make a start. Welcome everybody to National Ag Day or National Forester Day for our Forester Time session for Friday afternoon, the 20th of November 2020. And we're very fortunate today to have a presentation from Kat Cresswell to talk to us about her forestry world with us all. So, but first of all, I'd like to welcome also Beth Weldon from Forest Learning, just to introduce the afternoon session. Over to you, Beth.
That's great. Thank you, Luciano, and happy National Ag Day, everybody. It's so fantastic to see you all here. And we saw very briefly one class and all your smiles and your waves. So we are here live. Remember what Luciano said, you can ask your questions in the chat box below. So while we're doing the presentation, we will have our microphones muted, but then at the end of the session, we'll have no doubt, some really good questions from you all for Kat after her presentation. So just quickly, I'm going to share a little bit more about what we're going to be doing today. So you can see here, there's also another bit of a trick with Zoom. You're probably all zoomed out and know this already. But up in the top of your screen, you will have hide thumbnail video or show small active speaker view, or you can do a tile. So depending on how you want to see this session, you can toggle those settings so that it looks best up on your screen. But we're going to be looking today at where does our wood come from? And I'm hoping you're starting to question that yourself and think about the answers. So we're going to be hearing from Kat, who is a forester. And what is a forester? What do they do? We're going to be hearing from Kat about everything that she does as a forester, outdoors and indoors, helping to build a better world for our climate future. So I'm just going to go to the next slide. Next slide is, okay. I'm going to stop my share here. Sorry about that. I'm having technical difficulties with my presentation now. Kat, I'm sure yours will be brilliant. And you try. Have the same problems that I'm having. Here, I'll do it again. Sorry, everybody. Here we go. All right. I'm going to share this one. So I work for Forest Learning, which is Forest and Wood Products Australia, the research and development corporation for the forest and wood products sector. And we are half funded through Australian government and half through industry levies. And so we do a lot of research and development to help the industry move forward and into a bright future. So I manage the Forest Learning Education Program, which all the resources that we have for primary schools and secondary schools available for teachers, including free teacher packs. So if you haven't ordered your teacher pack, teachers out there, please do so. Go to our website, order a free teacher pack, and it'll be sent to you, including some wooden bookmarks and rulers for your students. So they've all been developed by teachers, for teachers, and aligned to the Australian curriculum, which is really important. And another thing is, if you really love what you hear today and you want to explore more, we've produced a new Forest VR toolkit for schools. And that's following the journey of the seed right through to shelter in terms of the houses that are built out of wood. And so you can do that in a 360 on your iPads or on virtual reality headsets, or even on your smart board, you can do it. So I encourage you to have a look at Forest VR as well, a new resource. There are some Year 5, 6 lessons coming out being written by Geography Teachers Association of Victoria and the Design and Technology Teachers Association of Victoria. So that'll be launched ready for next year. So today we've got Kat Cresswell from Forico in the beautiful Tasmanian landscapes of northeast Tasmania, who is going to be sharing more about where our wood comes from. So I'm going to hand it over to Kat now, and she's going to share a little bit more. Thank you, Kat, for being here.
Cool. Thank you, guys. Just bear me with 2 seconds while I make my screen all work nicely. So let me, oops, hang on. I'm not very good at technology like you guys, so.
And I'd like you, while we're waiting for Kat, have a look around your learning space or classroom and try and think of some things that you think are made from wood or wood fibre. Put it in the chat box at the bottom. What can you see in your classroom or in even your home learning area that is made from wood, and start thinking about where is our wood and what are we surrounding ourselves with wood.
Is that working for everyone now?
Yes.
Tori's cat?
Yep.
Great.
Brilliant.
And feel free to start, Kat, whenever you'd like.
All righty, guys. Well, I'm Kat, and if you look at all those crazy pictures on the screen that you have there, you can see that I love my job as a forester. My life as a forester is a pretty fantastic one. I get to fly in helicopters, hang out with some pretty cool animals, fight fires, and go bushfighting all the time. And I get to hang out in some pretty crazy weather, like the snowy times and cool funny faces, because the trees don't mind if I look silly or not. So my life as a forester is a pretty fantastic one. Now, I came from a farm. Now, some of you might live on farms or near farms. I came from a farm and I was born and raised a farm kid, which meant I spent my days running around and exploring and being outdoors a lot. My family had an apple orchard and a cherry orchard, which meant I spent lots of my childhood years surrounded by trees and yummy fruit. And that's exactly where my love for trees came from. And I spent so much time spending time with trees, I just knew I wanted to do it forever. Now, to get to where I am today, I went through and did lots of school. I wasn't very good at school and I was a bit naughty some days, but I worked really hard and I got there in the end. I went all the way through to the end of year 12, crossed my fingers that I hope I get into university, and I got into university in Tasmania in 2012, where I studied Bachelor of Agriculture. I really liked learning about soils and how plants grew and a little bit about business in the agriculture world. So I made sure I picked up on those things. I finished my degree in 2015, and then I was finished studying for the formal part of my education, and I was ready to enter the big scary world. And it wasn't so scary in the end. It turned out it was pretty great. I found myself in a job in forestry in Tasmania only a few weeks after getting my university degree, which is fantastic news. If you want to know anyone going through university, jobs are always a bit tricky to find. I found one really easily because forestry is such a fantastic place and people are always looking for highly educated and people that have a passion for what they're doing. So my career so far, I started 5 years ago with a company called Forico, and I work as a plantations forester in the northeast of Tasmania. Now, being a plantations forester means that I look after plantations. I look after forests and I look after everything to do with them. And I manage an area of 25,000 hectares. Now, that sounds like a really, really lot of hectares. It is. It's like a really big, gigantic farm that I have to look after all the time and help make it all grow happily. Now, as part of my role as a plantations forester, that makes me like a farmer. My role is to make sure that we can clean up the ground after everything's happened. We cultivate the ground, we make it easy to get around, and we do roading as well, just like a farmer would set up his paddocks before he sets a crop. I do weed control, so stop all the nasty weeds growing. We can do that by a helicopter or with some big tractor looking like machinery. We've got to try and keep all the pesky little animals away from eating all the baby trees that we end up putting in the ground. We plant the trees, we look after them, we talk nicely to them, and hopefully they grow really nice and big and quick for us. I also have to look after some native forest, and we'll learn the difference between a native and plantation forest in a little bit. But I look after these forests because we have to have them living side by side. So that means they have to get along really well, and we have to stop anything nasty happening to both of them, because both types of forests are very important to what we do and how our world works. I also have to look after and make sure the natural animals that might live there, and the birds and the insects and even the creepy bugs and spiders, are there and they live nice and happily and healthily, because that's really important. And something that we all have to face in Australia is bushfires. Now, some of you might have had some really scary summer times where the bushfires come a bit too close to home. I work with the firefighters to make sure that we keep our bushfires as safe as we possibly can, fighting the wild bushfires, but also doing controlled burning to prevent wildfires from happening and destroying property and trees as much as we can. So being a plantations forester is not a one job. It's like 10 jobs smashed into one, and you're doing something different every day. You're out in the environment, you're talking to people, you're fighting fires, you're up in a helicopter, you're dealing with animals. It's an awesome job doing something different every single day. Now, wood is everywhere. Have a look around your classroom or learning spaces now and see what you can identify that is being made from wood. You can see from my background slide that there are many things we use and love every day made from wood. Playground equipment, books, paper pencils, rulers, houses, furniture, buddy benches at school, bowls, flooring, and who can forget this year's debacle, all the toilet paper is also made from wood fibre, which is pretty brilliant. But if we aren't using wood, what are we using? It's always good to see the alternatives and weigh up what's the best choice for our planet. In construction, we have choices to make whether we build in steel, concrete, or wood. You can see from the chart that steel and concrete use a lot of energy, excuse me, use a lot of energy during the process of being made. Excuse me. Steel releases 5,320 kilograms of carbon per cubic meter into the atmosphere. It's huge. Wood, though, is a net storage of carbon from the atmosphere, storing 250 kilograms of carbon for every cubic meter for the life of that product. We also need to consider how easily the materials we use every day can decompose. Or how biodegradable they are. It is important to consider as the waste we create today, where it will be in a month or a year, or for your grandchildren to still have the rubbish at the tips. In our packaging, whether that be your food packaging or the containers or straws that you see, the paper bags and carbon break down into soil within 1 to 2 months. Just like on the forest floor, when sticks fall to the ground. Glass bottles and aluminium cans, you can see if they aren't recycled, take up to 1 to 2 million years. That's a long time. That's a lot of generations to have to deal with the rubbish on Earth. The last thing we could consider is our energy, and if it's coming from renewable or non-renewable materials. Coal and petrol are expensive and are 2 examples of our non-renewable fuel and energy. They are also large emitters of carbon back into our atmospheres where they are used, which is bad for climate change. Wood as a bioenergy source is renewable. It can be regrown after it's harvested for all future generations, and the carbon is released when it is used to offset, which means it's absorbed and stored by the wood by newly growing forests to replace it. We all care for the environment, and your school might be a sustainable school where you work to encourage nude food that's plastic free. energy audits to help us reduce our energy consumption, which mainly coal-based, and waste audits to help us be mindful of what we throw away. And another way we can help our environment at school and at home is through buying certified sustainably grown and managed wood products that have been harvested from forests I work in every day as a forester. This is the cycle of forestry and the story that I'm really very passionate about. This is what I do every day. I manage and grow and plan and to harvest trees in the plantations that are used in your every single day lives. And that you might visit and bike ride or horse ride or go for adventures through. I get to replant these forests again after they have been harvested to make sure we have more wood in about another 30 years. Renewable means that when we harvest the wood as a material on our everyday products and we use for school books, we replant the forest or the tree harvested for the next generation's wood supply. And this cycle can go on forever when abiding to sustainable forest management practices. Now, at stage 1 that you can see on your little screens, that's planting. So that's when there's just left like a dirt paddock or a hillside that's got nothing much growing on. We go through and we put all the baby trees back in the ground. When it gets to number 2, they're growing. We leave those trees alone mostly, and we just make sure they stay nice and healthy and happy trees, and we give them a bit of help if they need. And that rolls into step number 3, the management. We make sure that they're healthy. We give them some love and care. We might prune for them. We might give them a bit of fertilizer, which is food for the trees. We make sure that they're growing really happy, healthy trees and that they are good for the community. And then we get to stage 4, harvesting. That's when the tree reaches its end of its growing life and it gets chopped down and harvested and turned into something new. It might get turned into your table, a new house, books, or even some toilet paper. And then we start all over again. Not only is wood renewable, but it also helping to fight climate change by storing carbon absorbed from the atmosphere through photosynthesis. Forestry is Australia's only positive carbon industry, which is a really good thing for us. But where does our wood come from? Have a think about that one. As you've probably guessed already, our wood comes from sustainably certified forests. I work in forests in Tasmania, and many other foresters work in forests all around Australia. So there are many different types of forests around Australia, and these are only a few. Each one is different in terms of its cycle, and as forest scientists, we use science to manage them and keep them healthy and sustainable. So what is a forest? A forest is so much more than just a whole bunch of trees. A forest is a habitat for animals and plants. It's also an ecosystem where the soil, the water, the temperature, the plants, the animals, and the microorganisms all interact together to maintain balanced life cycles, which is really important. The complexity of forests and how they grow and their life cycles are what makes us as foresters important. We go to university and study lots, study forest science and forest management so we can safeguard and manage our forests sustainably for not only now, but also for all the future generations. Alrighty. We're going to have a go at an online virtual game show called Is It a Forest? Now, Beth might help me out with this one if anything pops up in the chat box, as I can't see it on my screen. So what we're going to do is look at the following photos of Australian landscapes, and as a class in your learning space, let us know in the Q&A chat box what everyone sees in the photos and if you think they're a forest or not. We hope that as we make our way through these photos, you will start to think about what might make a forest and try to come up with some ideas for yourselves in your classrooms or at home. All right, gonna give this a go? All right, is this a forest? I'll give you 10 seconds to have a think and you can respond in the Q&A chat box for everyone to see your answers. We all ready? Yes, this is a type of forest. It's a tropical rainforest in the Daintree National Park in northern Queensland. Now, is this a forest? I'll give you 5 to 10 seconds again, and you can think and you can respond in the Q&A chat box for everyone to see your answers again. All right, have a go. Are we ready? Yep. If you guess that was a forest, you are correct. It is a native cypress pine forest found in Western New South Wales and Southwest Queensland. We use cypress pine in our flooring and other really beautiful wood products, and is naturally termite resistant. So it's really handy when you live in somewhere where those little bugs like to get in. Are we ready for another one? Is this a forest? I'll give you another 10 seconds to have a think, and once again, pop it in the Q&A chat box and everyone can have a look at your answers. No, this one is not a forest. Nope, no forest there. This photo was taken in the arid, dry centre of Australia. The lack of rainfall leads to small plants and shrubs growing adapted for the forest environment. So it's not good for growing trees, which turn out into forests. Is this a forest? I'll give you another 10 seconds to share, to have a think and share your responses in the chat box again. So have a go. If you got it right this time, well done. It's a forest as well. This is a forest of mountain ash forests in Victoria within a national park. Now, is this a forest? It looks a bit different to the others, and I'll give you a few seconds to have a think and put your responses in the Q&A box, and we'll have another look in a minute. Well done if you got that one right. It sure is a forest. It's a pine plantation in South Australia, but it looks really similar to some of the forests that I work in Tasmania. Can you think of things that are common among forest photos you saw? There's a few similarities, wasn't there? Next, we're going to look at what makes forests a forest. You have a think about that first, and we'll get going. Forests are found in every state of Australia, but they all vary in how they look. Their height, their openness, or how close the tops of the crowns of which is the crowns of the trees, and the types of trees or the species of trees. From this map of Australia, you can see the most common forest type in Australia is the eucalyptus forest that's shown in the green. The blue or clantrus is the cypress pine forest we saw in the slides earlier, and the Daintree forest in the deep blue up near Cairns, Queensland. And where I work is in Tasmania, that little island right down the bottom. And within the red zones for the commercial plantations is what I look after and work in. Not all of these forests are able to produce wood production type wood. In fact, a total of 46 million hectares, or about 35% of Australia's native forest, is on land protected for biodiversity conservation, or where biodiversity conservation is specifically managed intently. Only 7% of Australia's native forests are classified by government as multiple use forests that may include use for wood production at least some of their area. But do we have any more ideas on where things might come from? They could come from lots of places. So some of our forests need to be managed for wood production. Why is that? We'll have a look. We use wood in our everyday lives. This is a carbon positive industry that stores carbon and is the ultimate renewable source. It helps us with the air we breathe and provides us with good water and healthy ecosystems through forests. Softwood trees are a group of trees called Gymnosperms. They have fine needle-like leaves with small openings on their surface called stomata that are always open. They reproduce by producing seeds from pine cones. The seeds you can see at the bottom photo are located on the scales of the pine cone. Hardwood is from trees like eucalypt, and it's mainly used for building and flooring and really nice furniture and making paper sometimes. Hardwood trees are called angiosperms and different to softwood trees. They are flowering plants. They have broad leaves and are adapted to drought and dry conditions, as they can control their openings and closings of their stomatas on their leaves. Now remember that word, stomata, not tomato, not tomato, stomata. For that's a big word, transpiration, which is when they suck up all the water. They produce flowers that are pollinated by bees and birds and other insects, and the fertilized flowers then become gum nuts. They produce, within the gum nuts, the tiny seeds form, and when they are ready, the gum nut opens up and the seeds are taken by the wind and the rain away to start their new life as a tree. So how can we know that our wood comes from sustainable forests? Because we choose to buy and source our wood and fibre from certified sustainable forests. Certification is given to us the tick of approval that the forest that grew our wood has been managed to balance the environmental, social and economic needs for the forest to ensure they will be around for a long time to come. So not only are forests sustainable, but the wood they produce is renewable. But what is a renewable source? This is something that I heard at a big meeting that I went to. And this was said by the head forester for the Queen of England. She has her own forester. This man said, the world needs forests. Forests need foresters, people like me. Foresters need foresters. Means we need each other. We need trees to work with. We're in our own little cycle. We've got to have each other to make it work. What is forestry? It's both science and art. The science of planting and taking care of the trees and forests, looking after the biology, the applied ecology, chemistry, and maths, the knowing of stuff. It's the process of establishing, managing, and protecting healthy forest ecosystems, which is the solution-based design thinking, applying, and doing. And then it's also the management of some areas of forest for timber production, which is the planning and logistical coordination with contractors and teams. So we do lots within a forest, and it's both science and creative. As you've probably guessed already, our wood comes from sustainably certified forests. I work in a forest in Tasmania, just like the one that's in the picture there, and other foresters work in forests, all different kinds of forests, all around Australia. So what's the difference between a native or a natural forest or a plantation? Can you see any differences in the photos? You're probably right in seeing that the natural forest is made up of native trees, and often with different ages of trees, different heights, different forest levels. It's all kind of a mashed together place. Many of our native forests have been used for wood production as multiple use forests for over 100 years and continue to be harvested and replanted or regenerated naturally by seed. The wood harvested from these native forests is only 12% of the total annual wood harvested in Australia, just a little bit. And in any given natural multi-use forest, less than 1% is harvested in any 1 year, and each tree harvested is replaced by at least one new tree being replanted. Plantation forests make up only 6% of Australia's forest area, but produce more than 88% of our wood. That's a huge amount. Each tree harvested in a plantation is also replanted for the next cycle of forest. About half of our plantations in Australia are softwood, so they're the pine trees, and the other 50% are hardwoods, which are the eucalypts or the gum trees. But what is the difference between a softwood and a hardwood, and why do we need both types of trees? The answer lies in their wood properties and by the way they reproduce. In a natural forest, seeds are harvested from trees in a forest that over many years and after harvest are replanted to the original forest tree mix. For selective harvesting, where only a few trees are selected by careful planning and in a given year for harvest, the light opening created by removing those trees makes the seeds in the soil germinate again. This is a great forest science. There is a great forest science behind everything we do in forestry. Nothing at all is done without very careful planning and thinking about what we're doing. Here we are going to explore a pine forest cycle and a natural forest cycle. Pine forests, like the one I work in, are just like farms. I said before I'm just like a farmer. They are planted, they are grown, and they are harvested just like a wheat crop or a lucerne hay crop, just like a farmer does. They start their lives in a tree nursery. Good parent trees are carefully selected, and their features like straight trunks and fast growth are then passed on to their children trees. This is called genetic selection. Each seedling is planted by hand. Lots of hard work planting by hand in recently harvested coops or forest areas. The spacing between the trees has already been very carefully planned out. We like our trees to be just right. These trees will grow up and we might need to give them a fertilizer, which is a bit of food, once their lives at the very beginning depend on the soil. The remainder of the 30 years of growing time, we go in and we thin some of the trees to make more room. We go in and thin some of the more bent looking trees, and what is left are the best, most straightest looking trees. Nothing is wasted in forestry. The thin trees are also used to make things like paper, as well as other products. Harvesting comes at around the 30-year mark, and big harvesting machines come in and scan the logs before precisely cutting them into smaller sized logs that will have the highest rate of return in what is being produced in a timber as possible. This is high-tech piece of machinery worth around about $1 million, if not more. They are really expensive anyway. You can see in this diagram that we grow softwood and hardwood plantations, usually close to towns and mills, to lower the distance to transport the logs. There are lots of people that work in forests and in wood production. Designers, furniture makers, sawmill staff, builders, the hardware store, truck drivers, contractors for harvesting, and so many more. In fact, in 2018-19, over 52,000 people were employed across Australia in the industry that generated close to $24 billion, that's a lot of money, worth of sales and service. There's a job out there for everyone listening in today as well. Whether you want to work in finance, in communications, in international trade, or in the forest just like me, there is a job in forestry just for you if you want it. A lot has changed. So where did forestry first start out? The practice of managing forests has been around since the beginning of people. Egyptians cultivated, harvested, and replanted trees of timber use for domestic use. There are references to timber productions, cultivation in the Hebrew Bible. So that's like ages ago. In the 16th century Germany, there was a foundation of modern silviculture. In 1664, the book called Sylvia, I'm not good at German words, was published in Scotland during the reign of King Charles II on forest cultivation, conservation, and production. The first formal education of forestry began in 1852 in Germany, and then in Europe, in the UK, and then it went all over the world. I get to learn and use lots of new toys and technologies in my job. Sarah will be sharing even more of her good technologies in her session coming up. A lot has changed in forestry since the early days, including the use of high-tech equipment and smart drone collected spatial mapping data to help foresters in their work. A typical harvesting operation can harvest in one day. On harvesting sites, you can find two types of harvest machinery. A feller buncher, or called a hot saw, that lays down the wood for grappling for a skidder to come and collect them, and then drag it back to a landing or the processing site where the timber is debarked, tops removed, trimmed up to log length with a processor, and then stacked ready for loading onto the trucks. A processor head that folds and processes the timber at the stump. This means that the timber is cut, debarked, and cut into short lengths in the field, and then is collected in field by a forwarder that loads the timber into its basket on its back and takes it back to the landing for loading onto trucks. You can see in the pictures there, we've got 2 different types of machines. There will also be an excavator on site for loading the trucks, typically with a swing grab to load the trucks, just like the picture up in the top corner of the screen there. So we've got an example of all the different machines there for you. But as I have just said, harvesting is typically 1 day in the life of a tree, of a 30-year-old tree. The 30 years before this time, foresters use a variety of management practices to keep and grow healthy forests. This is called silviculture, the growing and cultivation of trees. There are a few different types of machinery that you'll find on the establishment site, and this will depend on the site characteristics such as the soil or the terrain. Site preparation, so it's getting the site ready. Excavators will typically have a wheelco attachment. It's kind of like a big thumb for creating spot cultivation, or a plough attachment for creating lines of cultivated soil. Dozers may have V-shear blades for clearing with a plough and then ripping behind them. Also, modified skidders with a plough attachments are sometimes used. Weed control. Either aerially applied using a helicopter or on the ground using equipment such as modified forwarders or agricultural tractors. Burning. Burning of harvest residue is something conducted either on broad acre scale or with helicopter ignition or with windrow heat burning, which is done by hand using drip torches. This not only reduces the potential for unplanned fires from lighting up from the local idiots, or reduces the fuel load of its mature forest, but also open up the coop to allow for cleaning of line of sight operations. This process also helps with the natural return to site of potash. That's the ash left behind, is really good for the trees. Browsing control or game control. This is the population control of vertebrate animals such as wallabies, possums, and deer, which can heavily browse and destroy young seedlings. This is done by using professional operators under super strict rules. Planting. Planting is a manual process, regardless of the species being planted. Planting is done using either a planting spade, just like a regular shovel but a bit more pointy, or a pot of pookie, which is like a tube that you plant, like a pot of pookie, which is a tube-like planting tool where the application of fertilizer or planting can be done at the same time. The aim of the game is to get the seedling through the height of 50 centimeters as fast as possible so that it can take up to 18 months sometimes to get to this point. So we've got to look after those trees up until that point as foresters. That's our job, to make sure those trees grow up nice and safe. The future is bright for anyone interested in forest management. There are heaps of jobs. You can be ecologists, you can work in planning, biodiversity specialists, or contractor management. Staff in forest industries have a range of backgrounds and areas of study. Forest science, ecology, geography, aquatic sciences, policy, compliance, modelling, or like me, agricultural science. There is a mix of tertiary, so university, TAFE, or technical backgrounds for people out there who want to get into forestry. A university degree is not required to get into forestry either. You can get in there lots of different ways. So give it a crack next time you're out and about and you see a forest. Ask someone, how can I get a job in there? What can I do? You might be able to do some work experience, have an internship, or volunteer. It's a brilliant thing to do. questions. Use the Q&A function to write in any questions for myself to answer now. And I'm going to turn off my screen so hopefully Beth can come back in and take control.
Everybody, thank you so much, Kat, for that. It's fantastic to hear more about what you do and to see the cycles of forestry. We do have already quite a lot of chat questions, which is awesome. So thank you everybody who've been writing those in. I'll go up to the top. Oh, we've got a lot of questions.
Well, sorry, I couldn't see them, guys. My computer wasn't playing nice, and I'm not good at this stuff. I'm good at growing trees, not computers.
It's all great. So saying, how sustainable are the forests in Australia?
In Australia, we just talked about that in one of our slides in there. And we said our forests in Australia are super sustainable. For every single tree that we chop down, whether it be in a natural forest that we're managing or a plantation forest that we're managing, every one tree that gets chopped down gets a new baby tree put in the ground to replace it. So we're always replacing that tree all the time, and we're making sure that we're not chopping down too many. We've always got baby seedlings growing. We always do it as best we can with as much science as we can. So it's super sustainable.
And the other thing to note too is that all of our forests that we get our wood from should come from sustainably certified forests, such as Responsible Wood here in Australia or the FSC. So even on your copy paper that you have for photocopying at your schools, you'll have little logos on there, and make sure when you do buy your paper that it comes from PEFC or Responsible Wood or FSC certified forests. So that means that people like Kat are working to make sure that those forests are sustainable into the future. So that's really important. We have a role to do as consumers as well. So the next ones are, do you export wood from Australia? And the answer is a big yes. In fact, we export a lot of wood, not so much at the moment. In fact, our exports have gone down a little bit this with COVID because everyone's ports are shutting and not open. But we have a lot of different countries that we sell our wood to. But the funny thing is, or interesting thing is, we import a lot of our wood as well. So we don't produce enough of the wood that we need. A lot of the wood that we sell overseas is in chip form, which is usually what Kat was talking about, the thinning operations. So it's more like the plants or the trees that are removed from a plantation to allow the bigger trees to grow more healthy and straight. And the other ones get put into chip and they're taken overseas for people who also use wood products overseas in paper and in construction. So the other question is, what's the best thing about being a forester, Kat? And how long have you been working? How many trees do you cut down each year? And how many trees do you plant every year?
Great questions. Well, I've been doing my job for 5 years. So I've been a forester for 5 years now. And my favorite part of my job would have to be, I don't know, I don't have one favorite bit. I get to do something different every day. I get to see the forest grow up in front of me. I get to do things like this with you guys and share what I do. I get to fly in helicopters. I get to see animals. I can go talk to farmers. I get to work outdoors. When it's raining, I can go and hide inside. I get to do so many different things in my day. I don't have one favorite thing. I just love what I do, all the bits of it. How many trees do we cut down though? Well, in Tasmania, in the forest that I work in, we cut down about, maybe 4,000 hectares of trees a year. Now that works out to be close to maybe 10,000 trees, give or take a little bit, but they're all plantation trees. And for every single one of those trees that we chop down, we put one back in the ground. Sometimes we put 2 for 1 back in the ground. So if we chop down 10,000 trees, we are by minimum putting 10,000 trees back in the ground. Sometimes we'll put a few more. So every tree we chop down, we put back in the ground. This year, I looked after the plantations in my area, and I personally saw over 1.2 million trees go in the ground. And that's not only plantation trees, but some work that I've done in some natural forests that got a bit sick from a bug that went through them. So we put some native trees back in there to help those forests be sustainable again, all on their own.
That's great. We've got some more. We've probably only got time for one or two more questions, right, Luciano?
That's right.
Yeah. So one of the thing is, what's the difference between hardwood and softwood? And I think Kat did a good job at sharing that, but I've got another screen that I could show you to show you the difference between hardwood and softwood. I've also provided in the chat box a link to a forest learning resource which goes into all of this, and you as students can do it at question and answer as well, and there's a video to watch. So hardwood, relatively broadleaf, very hard, strong wood, and softwood is coniferous or cone bearing. And so it's the difference between how they reproduce is mainly the biggest reason why we say hardwood and softwood. So the angiosperm or the gymnosperm. And another question for you, Kat, is have you ever ridden in one of those $1 million machines?
I sure have. And it was the most scary and exciting thing I've ever done. I got to drive one for a little bit, and I was very proud that I didn't crash it, because they are really big, scary machines and they are very expensive. But I've only done it once, so I tick that off my list. But yes, I have.
That's right. And there's more questions about seeds, and do we plant seeds? The question there would be that we actually, the nurseries grow the seeds, and they plant the seeds into a potting mix, just like at a nursery, that become little seedlings about yay big. And then each of those is planted by hand. So people who are contractors, tree planters, that's their full-time job of planting tree seedlings all day long, every day. And they get to be outside in the beautiful Tasmanian wilderness and planting trees all day. And how tall and thick do the trees get, Kat, when they're ready for harvest?
Our eucalypt trees, so our hardwood trees, they can be up to 20 or 30 meters tall, depending on how long we let them grow. And they can be as thick as that thick if you want, as thick as a soccer ball, or as thick as you can possibly get your arms around them. It really depends on how long they are grown for and where they are grown. Do they have good soil? Do they have good rainfall? Or are they in a bit of a yucky country? Same thing with our pine trees or our softwoods. They are very similar. They can go to 20 or 30 meters tall, depending on how long we leave them. And how big they grow depends on where they're grown as well, but also how many times they are thinned, because that gives each tree more room to grow every time it's thinned. So it depends on how we manage that forest as to how big it can grow. But a plantation tree can go from being that big to really big, as big as you like, as long as we leave it there, the bigger it'll grow. So it's not an exact science sometimes. It kind of depends on where it grows and how well it grows.
That's great. Well, thank you, everyone. I know the bell's going to be ringing in your schools for some.
Indeed.
So,
and the bell's going to be ringing here too. But thanks everyone for joining in National Ag Day for Forester Time today on National Ag Day, and thanks to Kat for a presentation today that was sensational, and thanks to Beth for her presentation and telling us all the wonderful things about forest learning. So there's lots and lots of fantastic resources available to get kids in the classroom to learn all about the forest and wood products. It's a sensational topic and really engaging. And thanks to all our participants today for joining in and supporting National Ag Day. It was sensational to see everyone here and all the fantastic questions. So thank you, everybody.
Have a great day, everyone.
Have a great one, guys.
Thank you.
See you later. See you in the forest one day.
Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Kat. Thanks, Beth.
Thanks, Luke.
Guys.
Thanks, Kat.
Bye.
And we have another session coming up now with a horticulture presentation all about stone fruit. So if you're in the current session now and you want to stick around for the next session, just please stay in the chat room, in the Zoom room. And we'll be starting again very soon.
Thanks, Luciano.
Thanks, Beth.
Bye.